true. I always have to point that out, because whenever I tell personal stories, people inevitably ask,
was that true? Yeah. Was it?
And I never know how to answer that. I guess I could say it louder, like,
yeah. It's probably true. You said it louder.
Growing up, I was always discouraged from telling personal stories. My father would often use the phrase,
don't tell anyone.
But not about creepy things. I don't want to lead you down the wrong path. It'd be about insignificant things. Like, I wouldn't make the soccer team, and my dad would say, don't tell anyone. And I would say,
they're going to know
when I show up to the game and I'm not on the team, and I'm crying. My dad is a very serious man. He's a doctor.
A neurologist.
When he's home, he usually spends most of his time reading through these thick books. My dad goes through war novels like I go through boxes of Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Quickly, aggressively, passionately.
My dad is the type of man who knows stuff, which is intimidating for a guy like me, who knows nothing. Well, not nothing, it's just, we know different sides of things. Like my dad knows
about the hemispheres of the brain.
And I know that if I spill Diet Coke on my laptop,
it probably won't start again.
Which is why I think my dad was so disappointed that I became a comedian. He spent his whole life trying to send me to college so that I can learn stuff, and I didn't. I got a job making fun of him in front of strangers.
His whole plan backfired.
The one time I built up the courage to ask him,
how come you play everything so close to the vest?
The more people know about you, the more they can use it against you. This sent shivers down my spine, because it has that open-ended fear to it. You know that feeling when you're driving and you see a cop and you're not speeding and you don't have drugs, but you're thinking,
I hope he doesn't notice I'm driving.
I'm more like my mother. We're both talkers. We'll talk on the phone for hours, and regardless of how long the conversation lasts, she'll always end it with the phrase,
one more thing.
Though it rarely deserved to be one more thing. It's always something like,
one more thing. Sarah, from my swim class, bought a rice cooker.
That's not a one more thing.
In long division, that would be called a remainder.
Save up 10 of those, we'll give you a conversation.
Once in a while, I would try to tell personal stories at the dinner table, and my father would say,
hush.
Let me give you an example. In grade school, I was a terrible reader. I remember doing these things called student reading assignments where the teacher would post on the wall a list of how many books everyone had read.
A great way to squash a child's self-esteem.
I remember there was this girl in my class.
Jean Bergson.
She finished
146 books.
Before I finished
2.
I distinctively remember thinking, I think I might be retarded. And then I would look at the wall and think,
oh yeah, I am.
It's obvious I had some sort of ADD, but I didn't know that at the time. So one night at dinner, I told my dad,
I think I might be retarded.
Hush. Which is one way to handle a problem. Keep it under wraps. But that's what my dad did anytime anyone told uncomfortable stories. So I developed this habit of telling uncomfortable stories.
So here it goes.
Sleepwalk with me.
By Mike Birbiglia.
When I was 19, my doctor found a malignant tumor in my bladder. But it's funny.
Stay with me.
Because I was a hypochondriac. And the best thing that can happen to you as a hypochondriac is you get cancer. Because it confirms every fear you've ever had and allows you to say to your family, see, I told you. Remember last week when I was overtired and thought I had rickets? I was probably right about that too.
There's going to be a lot of changes around here.
It was less funny at the time. I remember my dad taking me to see his urologist friend, Dr. Del Vecchio. See, at the time, I didn't know what urologists did. I was thinking this is going to go pretty well.
Listen, Mike, you gotta come in tomorrow morning for a cystoscopy.
Doctors always dress this stuff up.
It's no big deal. You come in, we put an IV in you, you fall asleep. You wake up, you get a muffin, then you go home.
I said, okay, but what's a cystoscopy? Then Dr. Del Vecchio took out a rod about 4 feet long.
This This has a camera at the end of it, and we stick it through your urethra to look at your bladder.
I feel like you glossed over a few details in the initial description. I feel like there was too much emphasis on the muffin, and not enough mention of the fishing rod. While I was under, they found something in my bladder.
You know, an item.
So they put me under deeper to try to get it out. When I woke up in the hospital, I was sky high with my mom. Which wasn't the first time I've been high with my mom.
But it was the first time she knew.
But in my mind, it's a dance. I shout, "This place is awesome! We should come here all the time! Dad's always here! Because he's a doctor!
A neurologist!
But then my mother was mortified. And I was like, shh!
Do you hate me?
On the car ride home from the hospital, my mother told me,
The doctor found something in your bladder.
whenever they tell you that, it's never anything good.
We found something in your bladder.
And it's season tickets to the Yankees!
Talk about highs and lows. I was the highest I'd ever been, and then I was told I might die. Which is like being handed a pizza,
And then being shot in the face.
so I started crying. And my mother started crying. Because crying is a lot like throwing up.
It's a chain reaction.
For a week I had to wait for the results of the biopsy. So, for a week I thought I might die. Which is an incredible experience.
If you ever have the chance to try it.
You'll start talking to God even if you don't think there is a God. You'll talk to anyone who you think has more power than you because you really want to cover your bases.
God? Allah? The elephant thing from Hinduism? L. Ron Hubbard? Harry Potter?
I ran loyal to Jesus, but I'm not stubborn. A week later, the biopsy came back. I was fortunate because while the tumor was malignant, the doctors had caught it early enough. I didn't have to take any further action except every 6 months, as a precaution, I'd have to come in for a
Cystoscopy.
And it was okay because afterwards,
You can have a muffin!
now, I'm going to tell you my most personal story. It's actually one of the most terrifying things that ever happened. It's January 20th, 2005, and I'm in Walla Walla, Washington.
Which is a place.
I'm staying at a hotel called La Quinta Inn. Some people correct me when I say that.
No, it's not La Quinta.
It's La Quinta!
It's not fair. You can't make me speak Spanish. I didn't press 2. Anyways, I'm in
La Quinta Inn in Walla Walla, Washington.
It's 1 a.m. and I'm lying in bed. I've just performed 5 colleges in 4 days, and I'm exhausted. But I'm not going to sleep because I'm an insomniac. Finally, I pass out. I have this dream that there's a guided missile heading straight towards my room, and there are all these military personnel in the room. I jump out of bed and say,
What's the plan?
The missile coordinates are targeted specifically on you!
This wasn't the first time I'd watched in my sleep. Let me start at the beginning. It all started around the time I met Abby. When I was in college, I fell in love with Abby. Falling in love for the first time is a completely transcendent experience.
It's like eating pizza-flavored ice cream.
Your brain can't even process that level of joy. Love makes people do crazy things.
Like kill other people.
Or shop at Crate and Barrel.
And that's what love is. This giant mound of pizza-flavored ice cream.
And delusion.
I fell for Abby immediately because she had this big, beautiful smile. It seemed like her teeth were bigger than her head.
But in a really sexy way.
I kept running into her on campus because I was following her. I'd say something like,
Hey, maybe we should hang out sometime. Like, not by mistake.
and she would say,
No.
which was hot also because I knew she was sensible. But I wore her down. Well, I tricked her.
That's how you get the best ones.
I threw her an off-speed pitch and invited her to church on our first date. She was focused on the priest, and focused on her. At the end of Mass, it started raining. I remembered to bring an umbrella, so I was able to walk her home in the rain. As we walked, she held onto my arm. It was the happiest I'd ever been. When I got home that night, I emailed my brother in the study lounge.
I just went out with the girl I'm going to marry.
Eventually, Abby and I were living together, and it was a secret. This was her idea.
We should live together.
Now, what I should have said was,
I don't know if my parents would go for that, because they're very conservative.
but what I did say was,
Yeah!
so when my parents visited, we just put all our stuff in the bedroom and closed the door.
And it actually worked.
It was exciting, but lying to my parents like that caused me anxiety. That's when I started walking in my sleep. I started having this reoccurring dream that there was a giant hovering insect-like jackal in my bedroom. Each time I had this dream, I would jump up on her bed and strike a karate pose. I had never taken karate before.
But there were books at the book fair.
So in this book fair karate pose, I would shout,
Abby! There's a jackal in the room!
She got so used to this that she could talk me down while remaining asleep.
Michael, there's no jackal. Now go to sleep.
Are you sure?
Yes, Michael, there's no jackal. Now go to sleep.
I would lie down, knowing there was a jackal.
This continued for years.
One night I had this one dream that I was in the Olympics, in some sort of arbitrary event like
Dustbustery!
and they told me,
Congratulations! You got third place.
so I climbed onto the third place podium. And then they said,
Actually, you got second.
so I climbed onto the second place podium. And it started wobbling.
And wobbling, and wobbling.
And I woke up as I was falling off our living room bookcase onto our TiVo, which sat on the floor. It broke into pieces and I was completely disoriented. Abby woke up.
Michael, what happened to our TiVo?
I got second place. And I'm really sorry. So I was now 23 years old. And it was becoming clear that Abby wanted to get married. And it was also becoming clear that my parents wanted me to get married. Which was strange. Because I didn't know my parents wanted to be married to each other. I always thought they were going to split up because my dad would fly off the handle suddenly, and no one knew why. He'd say something like,
Dagnabbit, I'm eating pretzels.
I would think,
Is he angry? Is he hungry? What is the emotion being expressed?
one afternoon my dad and I were watching golf, and he turns to me and says,
Michael, at some point, you gotta zig or zag.
that was it. It was like a UFO.
Wait! Come back! I need more information!
UFO was gone, and all that I knew was that I had to zig or zag.
Zig or zag?
I didn't even know which was zigging or which was zagging.
Or zag?
But I knew it was important.
Zig
Abby
or
also
zag.
wanted me to zig or zag,
Zig or zag?
which was troubling. Because I had always wanted to marry Abby from the moment we met, but I started to have this sinking feeling that maybe marriage would be like school. Remember when you were real little and thought,
Maybe someday I'll get to go to school.
but then you go to school. And the first week you're like,
How much longer do I have to go to school?
17 more years.
Oh no! I never should have gone to school!
so then I started thinking, maybe I should break up with Abby. Around this time I went to my brother Joe's wedding. Now, if you're ever in a relationship that seems to be moving towards marriage, and you're not comfortable moving in that direction, don't go to my brother Joe's wedding.
Because it'll come up.
I remember we were taking family photos, and my mom pulled me into a photo.
Michael, would you like Abby to be in this photo?
I said yes, but not fast enough.
There was a slight pause.
And there was a reason for the pause. Just that week I had gotten back from a month on the road, driving club to the club across the nation making just a little bit more than gas money and living in awful hotels. But I loved it. One night at this one club, this waitress was taking my order, and we were making small talk.
Hey, I just got done at my other job, at Hooters.
I said, yeah?
You want to see them?
Now I thought to myself,
Michael, you are not going to give up your relationship with a girl who sees your secret special skill and can talk you down from a karate pose for a Hooters girl.
so I said, actually, I shouldn't be here, because I have a girlfriend.
Don't worry, I know the drill.
Which blew my mind, because I did not know the drill.
What is this drill? And how can I find out more about this drill?
But I stopped myself, and I left the situation.
Few hours later, and after several drinks,
I re-entered the situation, and ended up in the back of Abby's mint green Taurus with this girl. I was overcome with guilt and shame, and I knew I shouldn't be getting married. But I couldn't say it. So I'm at my brother Joe's wedding. We're taking family photos, and my mom pulls me into a photo, asking if Abby wants to be in it. I pause.
Zig or Zag?
Later that evening, Abby asks me,
What was that pause?
that meant nothing. It was just a pause. I'm a pauser.
Michael, if this isn't serious.
Of course this is serious. I love you.
If you're not ready to get married, I don't even know if I can do this.
Abby, I do want to marry you.
When?
Now, what I should have said was,
Can we talk about this next summer?
but what I did say was,
Next summer.
Abby called everyone we knew and told them we were getting married. That's how I got engaged.
Without actually getting engaged.
So we started planning the wedding. I started having trouble breathing. I started sleepwalking more frequently. I thought,
Maybe I should tell Abby the truth.
and then I thought,
Maybe I'll eat dinner.
I went with dinner. So we started planning the wedding, and this goes on for months and months of very specific things.
Locations, dresses, flowers.
I know this isn't going to happen, and my breathing gets worse, and my sleepwalking gets worse. And Abby can sense it. One night she just doesn't come home. We were supposed to meet up for dinner at 8, and it's 9 and 10, and she's not picking up. It's 11 and 12, and I'm calling everyone we know, just trying to figure out where she is. And it's 1 and 2, and I'm just wandering our neighborhood, aimlessly hoping to find her. And finally at 3:20, she walks in, crying and drunk. I say to her,
Abby, where were you? You have to call.
Michael, if you're not going to marry me, I have to figure something else out.
a week later, I moved out. And it was for the best. Abby eventually met someone named Nathan, and they're still together today. And I eventually met someone named Jenny, and we're still together today. But the biggest difference is that Jenny is not okay with the jackal. I jumped up on the bed and said,
There's a jackal in the room.
No, there isn't. You have to see a doctor.
One night, Jenny and I fell asleep watching Fight Club. There's this scene in Fight Club where Brad Pitt holds down Edward Norton's hand and he's about to pour acid on it. I had a dream that was my hand. And I ran out of the hall and I threw a chest of drawers at my wake.
Because Brad Pitt is very cunning.
I hit an elevator button and Jenny ran out of the hall.
Michael, you're dreaming.
But
Brad Pitt!
You have to see a doctor.
And I said,
I will.
but I didn't. I did, however, do some research.
There are 78 different known sleep disorders.
Things that range from sleep apnea to night terrors, narcolepsy. I came across something called REM behavior disorder, which results from a dopamine deficiency. People with this disorder have been known in rare instances to kill the person they're in bed with while remaining asleep. And I saw this and thought,
That sounds a lot like what I have.
and I still didn't see a doctor.
Hush.
So it's January 20th, 2005, and I'm in Walla Walla, Washington, in. I'm having a dream that there's a guided missile heading straight towards my room, and there are all these military personnel in the room. And I get up out of bed and say, "What's the plan?"
The missile coordinates are targeted specifically on you!
And I decided, in my dream, and as it turns out in my life, to jump out my window. As to detonate the missile outside the window.
For the sake of the platoon!
In my dreams, I'm a hero. There are two important distinctions here. One,
The hotel room is on the 2nd floor.
and two.
The window is closed.
So I jumped through the closed window. Like the Hulk. That's how I described it at the emergency room.
You know, the Hulk. You know how he jumps through stuff? Yeah, that's like me.
So I jumped through the closed window, and this is the hardest part to explain because people with REM behavior disorder are able to do things they aren't normally able to do because they don't feel any inhibition or pain. So, I jump out the closed window, fall 2 stories, land on the front lawn of La Quinta Inn, got up,
And kept running.
so I'm running, and I'm slowly realizing that I'm on the front lawn of La Quinta Inn in Walla Walla, Washington, in my underwear, bleeding. And I'm like,
Oh no.
but the only thing that I can think is that I'm relieved that I haven't been hit by the missile.
That would have been a disaster. At least I'm still in the game.
So I drove myself to the hospital. I didn't see any other options. I wasn't going to knock on people's doors and be like,
Did you hear that guy screaming? That was me. I need a ride.
so I drove myself like that scene in Reservoir Dogs. I described what happened 3 times to the receptionist,
I'm the Hulk.
nurse,
I'm the Hulk.
and to the doctor.
I'm the Hulk.
And one guy corrected me.
No, you're Bruce Banner.
Point taken, nerd.
So I'm lying in bed with my clothes cut open, seeing the glass coming out of my legs. It was the most physical pain I'd ever felt. It was the physical pain of
Glass coming out of my legs.
combined with the emotional pain of
There's glass coming out of my legs!
So the doctor comes and he starts pulling the glass out of my legs.
Slowly. Very slowly.
For about 45 minutes. He says,
You should be dead. No. You should.
I zinged him. Because I'm a comedian. He put 33 stitches in me, and I drove myself back to the hotel. I got a new room because I felt like that old one had stigma.
And a slight draft.
About 4 hours later, I flew back to New York, and I did what I should have done a long time ago. Before I started singing Jackal, before I was in the Dustbuster Olympics, and before I threw a chest of drawers in front of Brad Pitt. I went to see my doctor, and I was diagnosed with REM behavior disorder. So now when I sleep, and I'm not making this up, I sleep in a sleeping bag up to my neck, and I wear mittens so I can't open the sleeping bag. Well, that's the story.
But there's one more thing.
About 4 months after this incident occurred, I went back on the road. It was becoming increasingly lonely out on the road. My agent would call ahead and say,
No. Mike has to stay on the 1st floor.
and inevitably they'd ask why. But my agent would cover for me.
Because that's what Mike Birbiglia wants.
So I'd show up to these places, and these people would hate me before I even showed up. Because I was this diva who had these strange requests that no one understood. Around this time, I took a show at a college in Boston. I arrived at the college and see the hotel the students have booked for me.
And it's on the 17th floor!
And I'm seething in anger. But I don't want to tell them why. So I drive to the hotel and I stumble through my set. After the show, the students who had booked me come up to me.
Hey, that was great. We'd like to take you out for dinner.
And I say,
No!
he looks confused. I have to drive 2 hours to my parents' house because you didn't book me on the 1st floor! He looks even more confused.
I had one freaking request!
I have pretzels moment. It destroys me. When I get home, it's 1 a.m. and my dad's reading on the couch. I'm so upset that I sit and I tell him everything that's just happened. And he listens to me.
Mike, how have you been feeling since that sleepwalking incident?
Actually, not great.
I'm starting to feel the slightest distance between me and everyone I meet.
My father thinks about this.
That happens when you get older.
And I get it. I never thought this was going to happen. I'm 29 and my dad is 63. And we're both sharing a truth that we've both experienced. He knows and I know. At this time, we both know stuff. So I start at the beginning. I tell him the whole sleepwalking story from the beginning. I tell him things that I never thought I'd be able to tell my dad. At the end of the conversation, he gets up and he sits next to me. He puts his hand on my leg.
Mike, you're gonna have to take care of this. You're gonna have to see a doctor and get a neurological workup. You're gonna have to take some time off the road and learn to relax. You're gonna have to deal with this because it's not going to deal with itself.
He's about to go, but he turns back to me and he says, "But whatever you do,